I think the U.S. sent a message. I think behind closed doors, it is common knowledge that what happened to the USS Fitzgerald was not an accident. Not at all. And I think what actually happened that night might be a lot worse than what we're even considering happened. This is the USS Robert Stetham. And in case anybody doesn't know, they sailed through the Paracels within 12 nautical miles of an island that the Chinese allege is in their territorial waters. Now, the Paracels are actually closer to China than the Spratlys are. And that's where the Dewey was, the USS Dewey, another early Burke-class destroyer that the Chinese had warned off a week prior to the issue with the Fitzgerald. So there is definitely some tension between the Chinese and the U.S. regarding these movements of these destroyers over there. Now, the reason I think the Stetham is a message is because it's named for Navy diver Seabee Robert Stetham. Robert Stetham was aboard TWA Flight 847 in 1985 when it was hijacked by Hezbollah terrorists. When they discovered who he was, they beat him, tortured him, and shot him in the head, dumped him on the tarmac for the cameras to see. I was 16 years old, and it was one of the most mortifying things I ever saw in my life. This man was a real hero, as were those young men aboard the Fitzgerald. Because as we go through this investigation, the only real independent investigation that's going on now, I think truly might be here at the channel. Because we have shown that we can't trust the Navy to give us the truth. The captain of the Crystal we've shown has lied 3 times. The governments of Japan and the Philippines have been barred and prohibited from effectively conducting any further investigation by not having any access to the black boxes from the Fitzgerald, no access to the Fitzgerald itself or its crew, which in effect ends their investigation. So it'll be the Navy only. Now, I would like to thank everyone who has come here to the channel and brought their input, and I would like to cover a couple of your questions today and show you how the investigation is proceeding with your help. So here in the comments section, we're going to go down, and earlier today, Vote Tea Party, 3 hours ago, said, as a response to one of my first videos about the U.S. Navy scrambling, says, "Okay, sounds plausible, but why were the men still in their bunks? Shouldn't have the captain called battle stations?" You know, this is an excellent question. This story of the captain being in his bunk along with the vast majority of the crew, I think might now be disinformation crafted by the Navy. Because think about this, folks. If we were to ask now about the disposition of any particular member of the crew during this event, I think the Navy would tell us that's classified. Because they wouldn't even allow the Japanese or the Philippine government to ask any of our sailors where they were when this all went down. But they volunteered the location of the captain and volunteered the fact that he was allegedly injured in the collision because he was in his quarters. So there's still a lot of questions, but we're going to get to the bottom of it. Nick Ferris, excuse me, am I wrong? Wouldn't an EMP attack permanently fry circuitry? They pumped up the water, right? Even the pumps have some kind of unit, as if that's part of the system, no? And that's absolutely a great question, because the issue here would be also the kid that made the phone call at 2:06 that there's an independent verification of. So if this kid was able to get a phone call off using an app that requires Wi-Fi, if there had been an EMP prior to 2:06, the phone wouldn't be working, the Wi-Fi that he connected to wouldn't be working, and on top of that, these pumps absolutely would not have been working, and they wouldn't have been able to salvage the ship. I can't believe they used buckets or handheld pumps to get that amount of water out that fast. So that's a great question. I'm kind of working up another theory, folks. And I'm with your help. We're trying to put all the puzzle pieces together, and it has to do with that those two mysterious jumps in the track we saw, the video of the track. And I think I might have an explanation, but I'm going to do another question or two here. Double D. Okay, so what you're saying, there was an intentional or coordinated attack, but to what end? Why would it be an international attack? Why? Where's the logic? Well, the Russians have issue with us. The Chinese have issue with us. The Philippines have a problem with us because we haven't helped with ISIS like they think we should have. ISIS is in that region. So we have enemies over there. And if they could have put a $1 billion destroyer on the bottom of the ocean, you know, that would have been, you know, on par with 9/11. It really would have been, to be able to sink a destroyer. That'd be a huge deal. So I don't think that there's any debate about the people that would have a desire to do this. And the Chinese, Hainan Island incident 2001 we covered, had no problem flying one of their jets and disabling one of our planes in flight. And it was only a miracle that that thing was able to put itself down. So Johnny C. Drums, if the crash took out the radio room, CIC would have had no comms either, because CIC patches all their circuits in from radio. The bridge has a radio for ship to ship. That's true. But we also have to go back to this kid that got the call off, and the sat phones that are reported. And that this kid was able to do this, and they said it was below decks because he was trapped below decks and was trying to call his dad, and that's the feel-good story they're putting out. It seems almost impossible, even under the best of conditions, that this sailor would have been able to do this, because other people from the Navy have come to the videos and said, while that ship's underway, there's no Wi-Fi. That would give away its location. If it was running MCON, there'd be no way. So at 2:06, at least at that time, we can probably establish that an EMP hadn't gone off yet, because too many verifiable other electronics were working. Johnny C. Drums, also, no such thing as a skeleton crew underway at any time on a U.S. Navy destroyer. Watches are manned exactly the same day or night. That skeleton crew term was used by Admiral O'Coin. Go back and check. That's what he said. That the crew was a nighttime crew, as if it was somehow smaller than any other watch. So this is how the investigation goes. Thank you so much, everyone, for the input here, because this is how we get to the bottom of things. Now, I want to go back to this track for a minute and ask you folks a question, because I really think you guys are going to be able to get this. All right. I know this is kind of hard to see, but remember here when we said that we saw this strange jump at point A at 1:30, where it just magically went from here to here very quickly. And then it motored, accelerated away, and then did this 9-knot turn, 180 degrees, and then came back here and then stopped, and then this other weird turn where it went from heading south and west to north and east, and went from 9 knots down to 3 knots. These are the two locations I think we need to worry about, because there is one scenario where it may have happened at 1:30, but you would have to assume that prior to 1:30, the ship had been dead in the water and disabled prior to that. And this is the only way this could go down if the attack happened at 1:30. What you're going to have to assume here is that here it comes, it hits the Fitzgerald here and stops. Then, as a cover story, the fake transponder is turned on here. The cargo ship actually stays. Okay? And this is all to give the Philippines a cover story for continuing on, the autopilot, the returning to the scene, the any aid and assistance, all this kind of stuff, to give them the idea that this was an accident and they were trying to help. What if the cargo ship hit this thing and stayed on scene? Because look at the attitude here. And remember, when it came back here, and this other weird little jump in the video, look at how close those two attitudes are right there. I wonder if the real crystal is here. This is all fake, all the way back to here, and then the real crystal picks its transponder signal back up here and then takes off. Because remember, we noticed up here, it didn't go along its original track. It didn't follow up through the channel into Tokyo. It went, supposedly it was going to miss this island. Well, it went between that island and another island and around the long way. And when asked, the lessee of the ship wouldn't even disclose where it was supposed to be going. And remember, they said at 2:25 they called, and that's where the 2:20 erroneous time came from. Well, we established that 2:25 was way back here. And it's kind of hard to see down here, but this confirms it. Because the B point, if you look, B is 2:05, and C is 2:35. That's here. So 2:25 is back here. E is 2:40. You know, this is supposedly 15 minutes after. So I don't think this track has anything to do with where the crystal was. That the crystal actually was here and rammed a ship that had already been disabled and had already been boarded by parties unknown, and then stayed in the region to remove those parties, and then just meandered off. Reported it as an accident, and the Navy scrambling now to cover its ass. Because once again, if you're going to believe the story about the U.S. Navy crew being so dilatory and having such poor seamanship and lack of attention to detail that they would allow a cargo ship to sail into them, that same logic would dictate that then they could probably be boarded by a special forces crew from either China or Russia. And I'm going to lean more towards China in this case, to disable this thing and put it at the bottom of the sea in coordination with this Philippine crew. That they get aboard, they disable the engines, and you have to, and somebody would say, well, how would you know they were there? How would you have known where to be? Well, we had high-level naval assets that were compromised earlier in this year. In Colombia, the commander of all the Marines forces in the South, along with one of his subordinates, were compromised. We had, just the week before, the USS Shiloh, a Tycho class, had this kid that supposedly behaved really strangely for a week, hid, and we know that 4 sailors aboard that ship were celebrating Ramadan at the time. And this was also the beginning of the last 10 days of Ramadan. Look up last 10 days of Ramadan and see what you find. We have seen people attack us that were very well coordinated in what they did. And we've known that they have had help from other sources as well. The Syrians are getting help from the Russians. Why couldn't these people? The enemy of my enemy, I think, applies here. I really do. But I'm going to leave it here and let you guys do the fantastic job that you guys are doing, you know, disseminating all of this. If there's any holes in what I've said or anything that I haven't thought of, please bring it up in the comment section. You know, and we'll continue forward with the investigation. You know, if we have to go back to the 2:20 timing, we will. But I want to ask you about this 1:30 thing, where if it did hit it here, we would have to have seen the ship disabled prior to 1:30. And who knows what was already going on. It would just seem strange also to me that the Coast Guard, the Japanese Coast Guard, would have been the first on the scene here. That just seems almost impossible, given that they were only 60 miles away from a Navy base. So, like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything. We will see you next time.